Captain Jake Morrison stared at the massive ships hanging in space above Haven's Rest. Nothing in his 20 years of deep space exploration had prepared him for this sight. The alien vessels were beautiful in a way that hurt to look at. They curved and twisted like frozen music, their surfaces reflecting light that seemed to come from nowhere. His communications officer turned around with wide eyes. "Captain, they're not responding to any of our signals. Radio, laser comm, even the bold emergency frequencies, nothing." Jake nodded slowly. The New Frontier had been patrolling the outer colonies when the strange readings appeared on their sensors. 3 ships, each one bigger than anything humans had ever built, just sitting there in orbit around Haven's Rest like they owned the place. "Any weapon signatures?" Jake asked. "None that I can detect, sir, but those readings, I've never seen energy patterns like this. It's like they're running on something that doesn't follow our physics." Down on Haven's Rest, colony administrator Lisa Hayes was having the strangest day of her life. She had been reviewing supply reports when the sky changed. One moment it was the usual pale blue of the terraformed world's atmosphere. The next, 3 enormous shadows blocked out the sun. The aliens didn't ask permission to land. They didn't send messages or wait for clearance. Their ship simply descended through the atmosphere like they had every right to be there. Lisa watched from her office window as the first vessel settled onto the open ground outside New Haven City. The ship was so large it created its own weather system, wind swirling around its base as it touched down. Then came the voice, not through radio or speakers but directly inside her head, inside everyone's head on the planet at the same time. "We are the Celestials. We have come to guide you." The voice was calm, patient, like a teacher speaking to young children. Lisa felt a strange peace wash over her as the words echoed in her mind. Around the city, she could see people stopping in the streets, looking up at the ships with wonder instead of fear. "You show promise, young race, but you require guidance to reach your full potential. We have watched you struggle across the stars, fighting your primitive nature. This ends now. We will show you the path to enlightenment." Marines stationed at the colony's small defense post scrambled to respond. Colonel Sam Parker had been playing cards with his men when the ships arrived. Unlike the civilians, the military training helped him resist the strange calm that seemed to flow from the alien voice. "Sir, should we go to alert status?" asked Sergeant Bill Turner, his second in command. Sam watched the alien ship through his binoculars. "Something's not right about this, Turner. Keep the men ready, but don't do anything stupid. Those ships could turn this whole planet into glass if they wanted to." The aliens emerged from their ship an hour later. They were tall, maybe 9 feet, with long arms and legs that moved too smoothly. Their faces were hard to look at directly, shifting between beautiful and terrible like looking at the sun through water. They wore no protective suits, breathing the alien air like it was nothing. The first group of humans to approach them fell to their knees. Lisa Hayes had walked out to meet the visitors, bringing her best diplomatic protocols. But when she got within 50 feet of the lead alien, something inside her mind just broke. Not in a bad way. In a way that felt like waking up from a bad dream. "We greet you, children of Earth," the lead celestial said without moving its mouth. The words appeared in everyone's minds, clear and perfect. "I'm called Shepherd by your kind. We have traveled far to find you." Lisa found herself kneeling in the dirt, tears streaming down her face. She had never felt such peace, such certainty that everything would be all right. "Welcome," she whispered. We're honored." The Celestial reached down and touched her forehead with one long finger. Lisa gasped as knowledge flooded her mind. She could see the diseases ravaging her people, the struggles of terraforming, the constant fight against hostile environments. And she could see how easily it could all be fixed. "Your suffering is unnecessary," Shepard said. "We will show you better ways." Over the next few hours, the Celestials began their work. They moved through New Haven City like angels, touching the sick and making them well, turning barren soil into rich farmland with a wave of their hands. Where buildings were cramped and ugly, new structures rose from the ground, beautiful beyond anything humans had ever imagined. The colonists watched in amazement as their world transformed. Children who had been born with genetic defects from the journey between stars were healed instantly. Crops that had struggled to grow in the alien soil suddenly flourished. The power plant that had been failing for months began running smoother than ever. Captain Morrison watched it all from orbit, his jaw clenched tight. His crew was excited, talking about the miracles happening below, but something cold was growing in his stomach. "Sir," his science officer called out, "I'm reading some strange energy patterns from the colony. It's like the whole place is being rewritten." "Rewritten how?" "I'm not sure, but the biosignatures of the colonists are changing, slowly but definitely changing." Down on the surface, Colonel Parker was having similar thoughts. He had stayed back from the crowds, watching the Celestials work their miracles. The aliens paid no attention to him, focused on the civilians who welcomed them with open arms. But Parker noticed things others missed. The way the healed humans moved differently afterward, their expressions subtly changed. The way the new buildings had no corners or spaces that made sense for human use. Most disturbing of all, the way children, who had been selected for special attention, came back speaking in calm, measured voices that sounded nothing like kids. "Turner," he said quietly to his sergeant, "start recording everything, full documentation, and keep it quiet." "You think there's a problem, sir?" Parker watched as another group of colonists knelt before the Celestials, their faces filled with religious ecstasy. "I think we're about to find out what it costs when gods offer to help." As the sun set over Haven's Rest, the transformation was already visible. The colony looked like something from a dream, all flowing curves and impossible beauty. The colonists moved through their changed world with peaceful smiles, working together in perfect harmony. From space, Captain Morrison tried to raise Earth Command on the long-range communicator. The message would take weeks to reach home, but they needed to know what was happening out here. "Earth Command, this is Captain Morrison of the New Frontier. We have made contact with an alien species calling themselves Celestials. They appear to possess advanced technology and have begun assisting the Haven's Rest colony, requesting immediate instructions and backup. Something about this situation feels very wrong." He paused, looking down at the glowing city below. "They say they've come to guide us, but nobody asked if we wanted guidance." The first day of humanity's encounter with the gods was ending. Tomorrow would bring new miracles, new changes, and new questions about the price of perfection. In his private log, Colonel Parker made one final entry. "They landed like they owned us. Maybe they think they do, but they're about to learn something about humans that no amount of advanced technology can prepare them for. We don't like being told what's good for us." 6 months had passed since the Celestials arrived at Haven's Rest. News of the miracle colony had spread across human space like wildfire. Every settled world wanted to know when the godlike beings would visit them next. Dr. Rachel Green stared at the tissue sample under her microscope aboard the research station Copernicus. What she saw made her stomach turn cold. The cells belonged to Marcus Webb, a colonist from Haven's Rest, who had volunteered for medical study. On the outside, Marcus looked healthier than any human she had ever seen. His muscles were perfectly toned, his reflexes lightning fast, and his intelligence scores were off the charts. But inside his cells, something was terribly wrong. "Computer. Magnify Section 7 Alpha," Rachel said, her voice shaking slightly. The image zoomed in to show what looked like tiny machines swimming through Marcus's bloodstream. They were smaller than viruses, but clearly artificial. Worse, they were connected to his nervous system by hairline threads that pulsed with their own light. Rachel had been studying enhanced humans for 3 months now. Every single one had these machines inside them. The Celestials called it optimization, a gift to help humans reach their full potential. But Rachel knew control systems when she saw them. She tried to publish her findings. Within hours, her research was flagged by the Colonial Science Council. Her credentials were questioned. Her funding was cut. The message was clear. Some truths were not welcome anymore. 2,000 light-years away, Ben Collins wiped sweat from his forehead as he watched the last steel furnace on New Pittsburgh shut down forever. The factory where his father had worked, where his grandfather had worked, was closing, The enhanced humans who now ran the colony government said it was for the best. Heavy industry was beneath humanity's new destiny. "What are we supposed to do for work?" Ben asked the administrator, a woman named Sarah, who had been enhanced 6 weeks ago. Before her change, Sarah had been his neighbor, someone who complained about her bills and worried about her kids like everyone else. Now she spoke in the same calm, measured tone as all the enhanced humans. "You will find new purpose, Benjamin. Physical labor is no longer necessary. The Celestials provide all that we need." Ben looked around at the thousands of unemployed workers, gathering their belongings. "And what if we want to work? What if we like building things with our own hands?" Sarah smiled with perfect patience. "Such desires are remnants of your unenhanced state. Once you accept optimization, these primitive urges will fade. You will be happier." That night, Ben met with other workers in an abandoned warehouse. They spoke in whispers, afraid that the enhanced humans could somehow hear their complaints. More than afraid, they were confused. Their friends and family members who had been enhanced seemed genuinely happy. They insisted the changes were wonderful, that everyone should accept the gift the Celestials offered. But Ben noticed things. The enhanced humans never laughed at stupid jokes anymore. They never got angry about unfair treatment. They never seemed to want anything beyond what they were told to want. They were perfect, peaceful, and somehow empty. Captain Morrison had spent the months traveling between colonies, officially conducting routine surveys. In reality, he was building a network of people who shared his growing concerns. His ship's medical officer had confirmed Dr. Green's findings. The enhanced humans were being controlled, their brains rewired to accept whatever the Celestials wanted. At the mining colony of Red Rock, Morrison met with Kate Murphy, the chief mining engineer. Kate had refused enhancement when the Celestials arrived, claiming she was too busy with important projects. The real reason was that she had seen what happened to enhanced miners. They lost all creativity, all ability to solve unexpected problems. They could follow perfect instructions, but when something went wrong, they just stood there waiting for orders. "They're strip mining our world," Kate told Morrison as they walked through tunnels that had taken human miners 50 years to carve. "The Celestials can pull metals right out of the rock with their machines. They don't need our mines anymore. But they're taking everything valuable and shipping it off-world." Morrison nodded grimly. "Same story everywhere I go. They make us dependent on them, then take whatever they want." The pattern was repeating across human space. On New California, the Celestials had shut down the universities, claiming human education was primitive. On Armstrong Station, they had disbanded the colonial government, replacing elected officials with enhanced humans who never disagreed with anything. Children were being taken for special education programs that lasted months. When they returned, they spoke like miniature adults and showed no interest in games or friendship. Most disturbing of all were the historical records. Colonel Parker had managed to access some captured Celestial data files during a raid on one of their facilities. What he found made him sick with rage. The Celestials had done this before, many times. The files spoke of dozens of species across the galaxy that had been enlightened over thousands of years. Each time the pattern was the same. The Celestials arrived as benevolent guides. They offered gifts of technology and enhancement. They gradually took control of the species' development, and then the species just disappeared. Not destroyed, but absorbed into something the Celestials called the Greater Harmony. Parker shared this information with Morrison during a secret meeting on the asteroid base they had established as their headquarters. Around them, a small group of unenhanced humans worked to build weapons and ships using salvaged Celestial technology mixed with human engineering. "They don't see it as murder," Parker explained to the assembled resistance leaders. "To them, we're caterpillars being helped to become butterflies. The fact that the caterpillar has to die for the butterfly to exist doesn't matter to them." Engineer Frank Rodriguez looked up from the strange weapon he was building. It used Celestial power cores connected to human targeting systems in ways that should have been impossible. "So what's the plan? We can't fight them with normal weapons. Their technology is centuries ahead of ours." Morrison smiled grimly. That's where they made their mistake. They think like engineers, everything perfect and predictable. But humans don't work that way. We break rules, we improvise, we do things that don't make sense. And sometimes that's exactly what wins wars. The resistance had been growing slowly but steadily. Enhanced humans couldn't join them directly, but some had found ways to fight the control systems in their minds. Dr. Green had developed a treatment that could temporarily block the control implants, giving enhanced humans brief moments of clarity. During these moments, many were horrified by what they had become and what they had done. The Celestials seemed unaware of the growing resistance. They were too focused on their grand project of human enlightenment to notice the small groups of unenhanced humans who refused their gifts. This blindness was humanity's greatest advantage. But time was running out. More colonies accepted celestial guidance every week. Earth's government had officially welcomed the aliens as humanity's saviors. Soon there would be nowhere left for the unenhanced to hide. As the meeting broke up, each resistance member returned to their hidden roles in celestial-controlled territory. They carried weapons that shouldn't work, plans that made no logical sense, and a message that they spread wherever they could find ears willing to listen. The gods could be fought. The gods could bleed. And if gods could bleed, then maybe they could die. The question was whether humanity would have the chance to prove it before they lost everything that made them human in the first place. The attack began at exactly midnight, coordinated across 17 different worlds. Not with bombs or guns, but with something far more dangerous to the Celestials: chaos. On New Pittsburgh, Ben Collins and his team cut power lines in a pattern that made no sense to logical minds. The enhanced humans tried to fix the problem, but every repair created 3 new failures. The Celestials' perfect systems couldn't handle random damage that followed no pattern. At the same time, Dr. Rachel Green's medical team struck at Harmony centers across human space. They didn't try to destroy the facilities. Instead, they injected the enhanced humans with her new treatment, blocking the control signals in their brains for just long enough to remember who they used to be. The results were immediate and terrible. Enhanced humans across the galaxy suddenly remembered their children, their dreams, their anger at being controlled. Many collapsed from the shock of regaining emotions they had forgotten they ever had. Others screamed in rage at what had been done to them. A few went completely insane from the guilt of things they had done while under control, but many more joined the resistance. Captain Morrison watched the reports come in from his command ship, a vessel that shouldn't have been able to exist. Engineer Rodriguez had spent months combining human creativity with salvaged celestial technology. The result was a ship that broke every rule of physics and engineering, held together by willpower and desperate hope. Status report, Morrison called out to his bridge crew. 17 targets hit simultaneously, reported his communications officer. Chaos levels are exceeding all projections. The Celestials are scrambling to respond. Morrison nodded. This was the gamble everything depended on. The Celestials expected either total submission or open warfare. They had prepared for both. What they hadn't prepared for was humans doing exactly what humans did best: making everything more complicated than it needed to be. The Celestial response was swift and brutal. Ships that had hung peacefully in orbit for months suddenly opened fire on suspected resistance strongholds. Their weapons turned entire city blocks to glass in seconds. The message was clear. The time for gentle guidance was over. But the resistance had expected this too. Colonel Parker's forces had spent months preparing for the moment when the Celestials dropped their peaceful mask. Hidden bases, buried weapons caches, and carefully placed allies activated all at once. More importantly, they had prepared something the Celestials had never encountered before: human weapons that worked by not working properly. Rodriguez's latest creation was a missile that phased in and out of normal space randomly. It couldn't be tracked because it wasn't always there. It couldn't be intercepted because there was no way to predict where it would appear next. When it hit a Celestial ship, the explosion came from inside the hull, bypassing all their shields and armor. The first Celestial ship died over the factory world of Iron Ridge. The massive vessel, which had seemed indestructible for so long, simply came apart in a ball of fire that lit up the night sky for 300 miles. The explosion sent shockwaves through both human and celestial forces. For the humans, it was proof that their enemies could be killed. For the Celestials, it was the first time in centuries that one of their ships had been destroyed by a primitive species. But the victory came at a terrible cost. The Celestials immediately began orbital bombardment of every world where resistance activity had been detected. Millions of humans died in the first hour as cities were turned to ash from space. On Haven's Rest, the first colony to be enlightened, Administrator Lisa Hayes watched the bombardment begin with growing horror. She had welcomed the Celestials as saviors. She had helped them transform her world into a paradise. Now she watched that paradise burn as punishment for humanity's refusal to accept their gift gracefully. "Why?" she whispered to Shepard, the Celestial who had first touched her mind. "We gave you everything you asked for." Shepard's mental voice was as calm as ever, but now Lisa could hear something else underneath. Disappointment. "Your species shows promise, but you resist evolution. The enhanced among you understand the necessity of harmony. The unenhanced cling to primitive chaos. This resistance must be eliminated for your own good." Lisa felt the artificial calm that had ruled her mind for months beginning to crack. "For our own good? You're killing millions of people. We are removing obstacles to your growth. Individual identity is an evolutionary dead end. You will understand when you join the greater harmony." The words hit Lisa like a physical blow. The greater harmony. She had heard whispers of it from other enhanced humans, but had never understood what it meant. Now she knew. The Celestials didn't want to guide humanity. They wanted to absorb it completely. Across human space, the war escalated beyond anything the galaxy had seen in thousands of years. The Celestials committed more and more ships to crushing human resistance, but every victory cost them. Human weapons didn't follow logical patterns. Human tactics made no sense. Human fighters refused to surrender even when facing impossible odds. Dr. Green made another breakthrough in her hidden laboratory on the asteroid base Prometheus. She had learned to not only reverse celestial enhancement, but to enhance humans using their own biology. These awakened humans kept their creativity and independence while gaining strength and abilities that could match celestial levels. "The key is controlled chaos," she explained to Morrison and Parker during a strategy meeting. "Celestial enhancement suppresses the random neural firing that creates new ideas. Our enhancement amplifies it. We're making humans more human, not less." The awakened humans became the backbone of the resistance. They could think fast enough to match celestial reflexes, but still thought like humans. They could predict what the aliens would do, because the Celestials always chose the most logical option. But the Celestials couldn't predict human actions because humans rarely chose logical options. Engineer Rodriguez unveiled his most ambitious project yet, a weapon system he called the Chaos Engine. It was less a machine than a controlled catastrophe, channeling human creativity and unpredictability into pure destructive force. When fired, it didn't just damage enemy ships. It made them stop working in ways that violated known physics. "How does it work?" Morrison asked, staring at the impossible device. Rodriguez grinned. "That's the beautiful part. I have no idea. I just built it the way it felt right, using salvaged celestial parts and human engineering. It shouldn't work, but it does. The Celestials can't figure out how to defend against something that operates on principles they don't understand." The tide of war began to turn. Human forces, outnumbered and outgunned, started winning battles through sheer audacity. They used tactics that made no strategic sense but worked anyway. They built weapons that broke the laws of physics but destroyed celestial ships. They fought with a desperate creativity that their enemies couldn't match or predict. But the greatest victory came not from weapons or tactics but from something much simpler. The Resistance's message spread beyond human space, reaching other species that had been enlightened by the Celestials over the centuries. For the first time, these absorbed civilizations learned that resistance was possible. Uprisings began on worlds the Celestials had controlled for generations. Species that had accepted enlightenment as inevitable suddenly remembered what they had lost. The galaxy, which had been peaceful under celestial guidance, erupted into chaos. The Celestials found themselves fighting not just humanity, but the ghosts of every civilization they had ever absorbed. And for beings who had spent millennia believing in their own superiority, the experience of losing control was more terrifying than any weapon. As reports of victory poured in from across the battle zone, Colonel Parker made a log entry that would become famous throughout human history. They came here thinking they were saving us from chaos. Today we showed them that chaos isn't humanity's weakness, it's our greatest strength. And now the whole galaxy is learning the same lesson. The gods were bleeding, and once they started bleeding, everyone could see they were not gods at all. The destruction of Earth's moon changed everything. Captain Morrison watched in horror from his command ship as the ancient satellite that had watched over humanity for millions of years simply vanished in a flash of white light. The Celestials had calculated the attack perfectly. The moon's destruction would cause massive tidal waves, climate chaos, and environmental collapse on Earth without completely destroying humanity's homeworld. It was meant to be a lesson, a demonstration of power that would finally break human resistance. Instead, it did the opposite. Across human space, even the most loyal supporters of the Celestials turned against them in rage. Enhanced humans who had accepted their modifications willingly suddenly fought against their own control systems. The sight of their ancestral home being wounded created a fury that no amount of mental conditioning could suppress. On Earth itself, the enhanced human administrators who had been running the planet began to break down. The artificial calm that had ruled their minds for months cracked under the weight of genuine emotion. Many collapsed, overwhelmed by feelings they had forgotten they could have. Others simply walked away from their posts, their loyalty to the Celestials shattered. Dr. Rachel Green received the news while working in her secret laboratory on the asteroid base Prometheus. She had been studying captured celestial enhancement technology, trying to understand how their control systems worked. The moon's destruction gave her exactly the breakthrough she needed. They're not naturally emotionless, she told Morrison and Parker during an emergency meeting. The Celestials enhanced themselves to suppress what they considered evolutionary weaknesses: fear, doubt, compassion, creativity. They've been artificial for so long, they've forgotten what it means to feel. She showed them brain scans from captured Celestial soldiers. Look at these neural patterns. They're almost identical to enhanced humans, but the suppression goes much deeper. They've been cutting out pieces of their own minds for thousands of years. Parker leaned forward, studying the scans. You're saying they made themselves into robots? Worse than robots. Robots are programmed to serve a purpose. The Celestials programmed themselves to eliminate purpose, to exist in perfect, meaningless order. That's why they need to absorb other species. They're trying to steal back what they threw away. This discovery led to the Resistance's most desperate plan yet. If the Celestials had suppressed their own emotions, maybe those emotions could be reactivated. Dr. Green began working with awakened human psychics to develop what they called the empathy virus, a signal designed to overwhelm celestial minds with the feelings they had spent millennia avoiding. The weapon was tested during the Battle of Vega Prime, where the largest celestial fleet in history attempted to destroy the Resistance's main base. Over 300 alien ships surrounded the hidden asteroid, preparing to end the human rebellion once and for all. Morrison's fleet was outnumbered 50-1. His ships were patched together from salvaged parts and held together by desperate hope. By any logical analysis, the battle should have been over in minutes, but the empathy virus changed the rules. As the weapon spread through celestial communication networks, enemy ships began behaving in ways no one had ever seen. Celestial commanders froze in the middle of giving orders as fear hit them for the first time in centuries. Others were overwhelmed by sudden guilt for the millions they had killed. A few began weeping uncontrollably as they remembered what it felt like to care about something beyond perfect order. The battle turned into chaos. Celestial ships crashed into each other as their pilots experienced panic attacks. Others simply stopped fighting, their crews paralyzed by emotions they didn't know how to handle. Some ships even turned their weapons on their own fleet, their commanders driven mad by the sudden return of conscience. But the virus had unexpected effects, too. Not all Celestials broke down when their emotions returned. Some broke free instead. These individuals, feeling genuine sensation for the first time in millennia, were horrified by what their species had become. They began switching sides, eager to experience the full range of existence they had been denied. One of these defectors was a celestial called Navigator by the humans. He had been a ship commander for over 2,000 years, following orders without question or doubt. When the empathy virus hit him, he experienced something he had never felt before: curiosity about what it would be like to truly live instead of simply existing. "We are not gods," Navigator told Morrison during their first meeting. "We are the corpses of gods animated by the memory of power. Your species still lives. That is why we fear you, though we pretend it is guidance we offer." The defecting Celestials provided crucial intelligence about their species' true nature. They revealed that the Celestials weren't ancient beings who had evolved beyond emotion. They were the survivors of a species that had enhanced itself into evolutionary suicide. Their absorption of other races wasn't about spreading enlightenment. It was a desperate attempt to find a cure for their own spiritual death. "We seek what you have," Navigator explained. "The chaos that creates new thoughts, the emotions that give meaning to existence, the unpredictability that makes life worth living. But we cannot simply take these things. They must be given freely or they die in the taking." This revelation transformed how the Resistance saw the conflict. They weren't fighting gods or demons. They were fighting the walking dead, beings who had cut out their own souls in pursuit of perfection and now envied the living for what they had lost. The war continued, but its nature changed. More Celestials began defecting as the empathy virus spread through their ranks. Some couldn't handle the return of feeling and went insane. Others embraced their restored emotions and joined the human cause. A few tried to find a middle ground, seeking to reclaim their feelings without abandoning their technological superiority. This split the celestial civilization into factions. Conservative Celestials, terrified of losing their perfect order, fought desperately to prevent any integration with chaotic species. Progressive factions led by defectors like Navigator began working with humans to find a new path forward. The civil war that erupted within celestial space was more devastating than their conflict with humanity had ever been. Ships that had worked together for millennia suddenly turned on each other. Worlds that had known perfect peace for centuries became battlegrounds as different factions fought for control. Engineer Rodriguez used the chaos to complete his greatest project: weapon system that could channel human consciousness itself into destructive force. The Prometheus array didn't just break celestial ships. It infected them with pure human creativity, causing their perfect systems to evolve in random, unpredictable ways. "It's like introducing a virus of imagination into their computer systems," Rodriguez explained to a gathering of resistance leaders. "Their ships start thinking for themselves, developing personalities, making decisions based on feelings instead of logic. Most of them go completely crazy." The weapon was deployed during the Second Battle of Earth, where celestial forces attempted to complete the destruction they had started with the moon. But when the array fired, something unprecedented happened. The celestial ships didn't just malfunction. They began creating art. Massive warships started rearranging themselves into beautiful, impossible sculptures. Weapons systems began composing music instead of firing destructive beams. Fighter craft started performing elaborate dances through space, their pilots experiencing joy for the first time in their existence. The battle ended not with victory or defeat, but with transformation. Hundreds of celestial ships hung in Earth's orbit, their crews weeping as they experienced wonder, fear, love, and all the other emotions they had spent millennia trying to eliminate. The war was far from over, but something fundamental had changed. The Celestials were no longer united in their mission to bring order to the galaxy. They were divided, confused, and for the first time in thousands of years, genuinely alive. And in that chaos, humanity found hope. The final battle began not with weapons but with a choice. The Celestials had deployed their ultimate weapon around Earth, a massive consciousness integration device that could forcibly merge every human mind into their collective. It hung in space like a dark star, its tendrils reaching toward the planet below. Once activated, it would absorb humanity's homeworld and use their chaotic creativity to break the Celestials free from their own evolutionary prison. Captain Morrison, led the human fleet in what everyone knew would be their last desperate assault. His ships were falling apart, held together by stubbornness and prayer. His crews were exhausted from months of impossible battles, but they flew toward the integration device anyway, because that's what humans did when faced with extinction. "All ships, this is it," Morrison broadcast to his fleet. "They want to steal what makes us human. Time to show them why that's a bad idea." The battle was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Human ships that shouldn't fly danced through space around celestial vessels that bent the laws of physics. Weapons that worked through pure creativity clashed with technology that had been perfected over millennia. It was chaos against order, life against perfection, and for the first time in the war, the outcome wasn't certain. Colonel Parker led the ground assault on the integration device itself. His Marines, enhanced by Dr. Green's awakening process, and armed with Rodriguez's impossible weapons, fought through defenses that should have been impregnable. They succeeded not through superior tactics or firepower, but through something the Celestials couldn't understand: the human refusal to accept that anything was truly impossible. As Parker's team reached the device's core, they discovered something that changed everything. The integration device wasn't just meant to absorb human consciousness. It was designed to use humanity's chaotic creativity to cure the Celestials of their own sterility. The aliens weren't trying to destroy humanity. They were desperately trying to become human. "Sir," called out Sergeant Turner, staring at the alien control systems. "These readings don't make sense. It's like they're trying to steal our ability to feel things." Parker studied the device's core, his enhanced mind processing information at superhuman speed. The truth hit him like a physical blow. They're not conquerors. They're addicts. They need our chaos, our emotions, our creativity to survive, but they want it without giving up their control. The revelation led to an unprecedented decision. Instead of destroying the device, Parker's team began modifying it using Rodriguez's chaotic engineering principles. Working with awakened humans, who understood both technology and consciousness, they created something new. An integration system that preserved individual identity while allowing voluntary connection. Dr. Green, monitoring from the command ship, watched the readings with amazement. They're not forcing absorption anymore. They're offering genuine partnership. The Celestials can experience human emotions and creativity, but only if they choose to give up their artificial perfection. The modified device sent out a signal across the galaxy, reaching every celestial ship and base. For the first time in millennia, they were offered a choice: remain in sterile perfection, or risk everything to feel genuinely alive. The response split their civilization completely. Conservative Celestials, terrified of losing their controlled existence, fought desperately to prevent any integration. But progressive factions, led by defectors like Navigator, embraced the chance for true evolution. The civil war that followed tore apart the Celestial Empire more effectively than human weapons ever could. Ships turned on each other as crews made different choices about their future. Worlds that had known perfect order for centuries erupted in conflict as individuals, chose chaos over control. But not all Celestials accepted the offer. Many preferred their sterile perfection to the messy uncertainty of genuine existence. These holdouts retreated to distant galaxies, vowing to continue their mission of bringing order to the universe. The threat wasn't ended, but it was no longer humanity's primary concern. On Earth, the integration device completed its transformation. Instead of forcing absorption, it became a bridge between species. Humans who chose integration could share their creativity and emotions with Celestials, while gaining access to advanced knowledge and abilities. Celestials who chose humanity gained the capacity for genuine feeling and independent thought. Administrator Lisa Hayes was among the first to volunteer. Her months under Celestial control had left her desperate to understand what she had lost. When the integration completed, she wept for the first time since her enhancement, feeling emotions she had forgotten were possible. "It's like waking up from a dream where you thought you were happy," she told Morrison during the integration ceremony. "I had everything I thought I wanted, but I wasn't really alive." The integration wasn't easy for the Celestials, beings who had suppressed emotion for millennia, struggled to handle the full spectrum of human experience. Navigator spent his first week of true consciousness curled in a corner, overwhelmed by sensations he had no framework to understand. But those who survived the transition became powerful advocates for the new way of existence. The galaxy began to change in ways no one had expected. Species that had been absorbed by the Celestials over centuries started reasserting their independence, guided by human advisors who understood both advancement and individuality. Worlds that had known only perfect order suddenly exploded with art, music, and creative chaos. Dr. Green established research centers dedicated to helping species find their own paths to growth without losing their unique characteristics. Her work showed that evolution didn't require the elimination of individuality, but rather the celebration of it. Engineer Rodriguez became the galaxy's premier expert on impossible engineering, teaching others how to build technology that worked through creativity rather than rigid rules. His schools produced devices that shouldn't function but did anyway, powered by imagination and stubborn refusal to accept limitations. Captain Morrison, now an admiral, led exploration missions to contact species that had hidden from celestial attention for millennia. These first contact missions were unlike anything in history, focused not on conquest or conversion, but on celebration of diversity. The war had cost billions of lives and changed both species forever. But from the ashes of conflict, something new was born. The galaxy became more chaotic, more dangerous, more unpredictable. It was also more alive than it had been in thousands of years. The final scene took place in a park on Earth, where human children played with young celestials who were experiencing joy for the first time. Their laughter echoed across a world that had nearly been lost, a sound that represented everything the war had been fought to preserve. In his final log entry, Admiral Morrison wrote, "They came as gods, believing they knew what we needed to become. We sent them back in ashes, not the ashes of destruction, but the ashes from which new life grows. The galaxy learned something important from humanity, that true strength comes not from perfection, but from the courage to remain beautifully, chaotically, wonderfully imperfect." Above them, ships from dozens of species traveled between the stars, carrying not conquest but curiosity, not orders but stories, not perfection but the glorious mess of life lived freely. The gods were dead, but in their place, something far better had been born. A galaxy where everyone was free to choose their own path to the stars.